What's up, Simonics, and welcome back to a new quick win. Today we're talking about Angular heavy things. We're talking about creating a reactive form based on JSON data that you might get from a server. In our case, we'll use a local JSON file, but we're gonna create everything dynamically. We're gonna create dynamically the forms, the form controls, the groups, the arrays, and also the view, which will use different Ionic input elements, datetime, text area, toggles, based on the defined information inside the model in the JSON file. So really kind of tricky stuff. I hope you enjoy it. If you want to check out the whole tutorial, you can find a link below visible for all Ionic Academy members. And if you're not yet a member, you should consider it. Check out the ionicacademy.com, my place to help you with everything Ionic. So let's do it today. Alright, so today I already started a blank new Ionic application because that is kind of the boring part of this tutorial, and I made a few little changes because I'm gonna load local JSON files for our form models. And to do this, you need to change your tsconfig JSON file to include resolve JSON module and allow synthetic default imports. So those two new entries go to the tsconfig if you want to load a local JSON file. Now, of course, since we want to use a reactive form, we have to change the module file of our page to include the reactive forms module. And once we got this, we can finally focus on our file. We will get started with a simple example. I've prepared a simple example JSON that your server might produce or that you can construct on your server side. You could add a lot more information in here and structure, but I just want to have something general that defines the model for our form. For example, you have the key, which is basically the final key inside the value that you get back from the form. Then you got the type, for example, input, boolean, or date, which will later define the HTML component, so ion input, ion datetime, that is used for something. And then you could specify some options as well, like a label that is displayed above, a placeholder if the field is required. In some cases, for example, another type for the field, but all of this, or basically most of it required not, is just for the final HTML. And only a part of this is for the actual logic to create the form group. Now, this is our form. Once again, as Ionic Academy members, check out the link below to the written version of this. And otherwise, let's continue with our home page. So I just pasted my JSON form into this cool page called JSON, no, not Josh Maroney, JSON to TypeScript, which will give you a nice interface. This is of course not required. I just added it so we got some more information about the objects we're using in our application. Now, we got a form group that we want to fill, and we got access to our advanced form. Let's quickly log it out. This .advanced form. No, we actually want to start with a simple form, right? So let's use the simple form instead. And let's log this one out because that's the one we're gonna check out first. So we got 5 different elements, quite easy, should be easy to display. Let's do this. Everything just comes down to really going through the keys, and first of all, from our class, creating the model with a form builder. So let's create a function, create controls. That's what the elements within the form group are called. They are controls. You have form group, you have a form array, and you have a form control. So we want to create our controls based on the simple form. Now, in your case, if you have an API, you would now make the API call here and then pass the result, which is the model for your form, into this function. In here, we can now already define that we're going to get an array of form, what was the name? Control object. Thanks. Yeah, I didn't came up with something better for this. I also got a little submit form function here, which just displays the stringified value of our form, so nothing really fancy. Now to create the simple form, think about once again how it looks like. It's basically an array. So we're gonna iterate it for let control of controls. And for each of the controls, we're gonna create a new form control. New form control. I think the form control doesn't need a value, that's fine. And now for some elements we had the required in here. Perhaps we could even move that up to the top level, could work as well. I just want to keep it in the options, but that's completely up to you. So if you want to check for the control field, for the required field, we could now check control options required because we got nice interfaces. And then we can change our new form control and set the validators to validators.required. From this point, I think you should see that there are a lot of possibilities to also define like the specific validator you want to use, like email validator or specific pattern, min length, max length. You just want to define perhaps some specific keywords for the right validators, or even use your own custom validators instead. And once you've set up the form control, you just need to add it to the form, and you can simply call add control for each of the controls. And the name of the control is now simply the control.key. So we're gonna add email, password, newsletter, because that's what we really wanna have in the end when we get the value from our form. So let's put the form control in here and let's log my form afterwards, this dot my form. And what we should see now is a nice error at control of undefined. Okay, yeah. Perhaps in the beginning I should set my form to this dot form builder group and just an empty form, because otherwise we could maybe get some errors. All right, here we see we get a form and we got the value, birthday, email, newsletter, notes, password. And that's basically exactly what we wanted to have. So now let's create the HTML. We could now go through the form, so simply the form group, but then we wouldn't have all the information that was specified in the JSON. So I rather want to iterate this JSON information to get all the information like label, placeholder, required, and that stuff. So first of all, let's create our form group, just like we always do. My form. On submit, we want to call a little submit form function, and then we can already close this, and I can also immediately add the button with the type submit. Should be disabled while the form is not valid, so we can check if our required fields are actually working, and then we can hit the submit. Now it gets interesting. Ion item. As I said, we're not iterating the controls of the reactive form, but of our JSON. So let's call this C instead of controls, so I don't have to type that much. Let's see of simple form. This should already give us, maybe we'll do it like this. This will already give us the list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elements. Now we just need to display the controls and the right inputs, and we're done. So should be an easy task. Really, actually it is. You just need to be a bit focused when you work with those keys, especially in the second part when we dive into the array stuff. And you know on which level you're operating and where you get the values from. So for the ion label, let's say position stacked. We can now display the, do I get code completion? Oh yeah, I do. Not the key, we actually want to say the label. So now we should already display for each of our input fields a little label. Now we just need to add the input. And because those might be different, we're gonna use something we don't use very often, and that is an ng switch. And we're gonna switch the type of our control. And now we can define different ng switch cases. So let's say Let's start with the easy one, an ion toggle, ng switch case. This should be displayed if the type is Boolean. And we want to add the form control name, which you usually always add inside a reactive form. And the form control is now, that's a question for you. Stop the video and think about it. Yep, that's just the key once again. Because we've seen our form right here. Those are the keys we got, and those are basically the form control names. And for this one, we actually got our little toggle right here. Cool. And now we can do the same thing for the other cases. For the date, we can use an ion datetime, basically the same fun. For the type text, we can use an ion text area. Once again, form control the same. And then we already got a bunch of stuff automatically in here, a date. And remember, it's really just dynamic. I'm not doing anything hard-coded in here besides the JSON. So all the information is used in here to dynamically create the code side of the reactive form, and then also to generate the UI of the form. The last part, which should be the easiest, was actually the most challenging. Because for the input switch case type input, there are a few more things to define. Because I was genius enough to add the type password in here, so we now also need to work with that. But once again, since we're iterating the JSON, you just need to understand your JSON or use the typings, the interfaces like defined in here, and then it's pretty easy to check. If options type is actually set, if it is set, we will use it. Otherwise, we will set the default type of an ion input to text. Actually, in this place, I wanted to use a pretty cool thing that in code would look like this. What was the name? Mike from Ionic said it in one of our streams. Nullish coalescing, something like this, but it's actually not yet working in the Angular template. It would simply mean if this expression is undefined or null or anything, use that value, otherwise use this value. Would be a lot shorter than checking if this is set, then use it, otherwise use the fallback. But anyway, that's how life is. We also, of course, need our form control name. And we can also use the placeholder, which should hopefully be inside the options once again. And I think that's basically everything we wanted to add to that one, right? So let's check our form. We got the label, we got a placeholder, we got the password, we can subscribe, we can add a birthday, and we can add notes. So let's hit submit. And we see email, test, password, whatever, newsletter, true, birthday, the value, notes, everything exactly and from the API. If I now remove this, we see the form is invalid because this field is required and the email was required as well. So the whole require logic works as well, which is just these 3 lines. Now, that was a simple example, but I wanted to show you one more thing, and that is a more advanced JSON. I think we will actually get rid of a bunch of things. I don't know which exactly. Let's just get rid of most of this to use the advanced JSON. So let's create controls for our advanced form, and perhaps I should show you the advanced form JSON format as well. It looks like this. I removed the stuff from the simple example. You could also add this, but I just want to make it put the focus now on using the type group and using the type array. Inside reactive forms, you sometimes have a group. A group looks like this. You have an address, and then you have a street, you have a zip, whatever, zip, and whatever country or something like this. And then in the end, when you get the value from the form, it is also like this because your backend expects it, or you just want to have it better formatted. That should be handled by the type group. So if our type is group, we want to create that structure, and from the interface, we won't do too much about that. And we just have a few children now for that group. I just named it children. You could also name it properties, whatever you want. Now, the second one is maybe even more interesting, and that's the type array. That's usually already tricky with reactive forms. And I just want to define an array. And within the children is basically a blueprint how the array should look like. I just added one item. We could even add more. Perhaps we will do this in the end if I think my dynamic logic is dynamic enough. In the end, what we want to get from this is something that looks like this. We have the key phone, then you got an array, and yeah, cool array. And within that array, you have entries with just one key right now, phone number. But you could have multiple of these inside the array. So we want to add a button to add new groups to the form array and also delete them, which is already in the normal case a bit challenging and requires thinking about it correctly. And in this dynamic meta way, it was actually... yeah, let's not talk about that. But we can do it. I promise you we can do it. Let's dive once again into the create controls. We actually could have let this line in here. I'm so sorry. We could have let it in here. I failed once again. Anyway, we're gonna go through all the controls, and now we're gonna add a check if the control type is equal to group, will be the easier case. Else if control type equals array. That case will be a bit more challenging. So let's do the first one. For the group, we just create a new group first of all. We can do this with new form group. And the form group, I think, needs an initial object. So we can just use an empty object. Now, for the group, I shouldn't have closed my advanced form. We want to iterate through all the children and add all of them to our group. We could do another for loop, but because that will look kind of ugly, we will do it in a cool way. We will use map to go through each of the children. So for each child, we want to create one new control, just like we did before. Actually, I think that is now more closer to the logic from before. One new form control, and we're gonna add that form control to our new group by saying new group, add control. Key is now, okay, this is where it gets tricky. Child.key, because at the top level, remember we had address and now we have like zip, street, country. And this one is this, and new control goes here. So that creates one new form group, and of course we need to add this form group to our form. So this dot my form add control for control.key. Now that is the parent one. This could be like address. And then we're gonna use our group in here. Okay, looks quite easy, and I think it actually is as well. Now the next part will be interesting. Our new group is now actually not a group, but a form array. And therefore we add an empty array in the beginning. And since we want to add one initial group in the beginning, we're gonna say one group equals new form group. This is what we want to add in the end dynamically. Perhaps we could also, I think we could even do this directly with a function. So let's add a function, add array group. And we want to do everything as dynamic as possible. I don't want to have any hard-coded names in here. So to add an array group, yeah, maybe it's one step too early. Let's first of all do it in here to get a better understanding. We arrive here with the type array, So with this block of information, which means we want to once again go through the children and create one form group for the children that we then push to the array. That is the whole idea. So we can iterate through all of the children, and for each of the children, we were just gonna add it to our group. One group, add control. Key is once again child.key and new form control. We could just do it like this. Now we've defined one form group. This should actually, I wouldn't call this new, let's just call this new array. I think that's more logic. Then we can push our one group to the array, and in the end we can add the array control to our group. Really, you see, it's quite stern stuff. You just need to go through the JSON data that you get from the server, and then you're able to create these kind of elements. Now, of course, nothing in here will work. We need one helper function, which is to get our form array by a key, because otherwise I had some TypeScript complaints. This just gets from our form the control at the position key, and we cast it to form array because we will just call it for arrays. You could of course call it for other fields, but do it for arrays and then we're fine. Back to our HTML, we can leave this in here, but then we're gonna let's just remove it. Okay, so what we want to do now, we don't want to open an item at the top level because we're gonna nest a few things in here. So let's start with an div ng4, let's see, of advanced form. Once again, iterating the JSON data, not the actual reactive form. And then we're gonna use our ng switch, and we're gonna switch the C type once again. Now the first ng switch case is the type group, because once again this part is a bit easier. And for the group, we can now directly add the form group name. Using form group name and form array name makes it a lot easier to structure the form correctly. And we know already that the form group name is actually c.key. That was added before. Now we can create items for all the children in that group. Select child of c.options children, and then let's do a test. Oh yeah, that's great. Child. Can we do it like this? I think that should already give us a first impression. All right, we see key name, type, input, options, label, whatever, and key street. So we just need to create the controls for those. I will simplify it a bit because I've only got inputs. You could combine it with the code from before to create like the best possible version of dynamic form. For now, I will just use child options label, and for the input, the key and the placeholder. And that's basically everything for the group. I could now say max and street1 submit, and we would see we have this address object, and in it we have another object with name max street street. That is the whole idea of the form group within our form. Now let's head over to the last example for today, which is the div ng, no, actually not, actually the ng switch case for array. And in that case, I feel like I'm in the wrong level. Is there anything wrong? Yeah, it is. We need to go there. The form group name is now a form array name because it's of the type array. And so it begins. Okay, for the array, we need to go through all the groups in our form array. So now we need to combine the JSON information which holds the meta information and the actual reactive form, because only the reactive form knows how many instances in that form array are present at the moment. Therefore, we go ng for let group of, and now it gets interesting. We use our get form array. We know that we want to get c.key, and now we can get all the controls from that array. The controls of a form array are actually always form groups. I don't know, they could also be form controls, but anyway, the function is called, or the property is called controls. And we also want to keep track of the index. This one will be important in the end as well. Actually, it will be important right now. I want to create an item group. That's just a bit of Ionic fluff around. Nothing you have to do. You could also use another div in here. But what's important is to connect this one, the form group, which is the index. Okay, at this point, I think I've lost you. In the past, I was always as well confused by this. It's just the first element in the form array that we can now directly use, because otherwise, if I just use like form, if I just use something like form control name phone in here, I don't know to which exact group inside the form array this actually belongs. So by using form group name and already defining it for that block, we know on which control inside the reactive form we're actually working. Great. Now that we got this, we can add an ion label to make it even more transparent for us that we don't know what we're actually doing. We'll just use key and the index +1 because index starts at 0 and maybe you want to show it in a cool way. All right, we got phone 1, our item group. So far that looks pretty horrible. And I think I feel like, yeah, around this I wanted to have an ion item divider. That should look a bit better. Nothing that we really need, but now we got that block separated like this. All right, the interesting part is to display now the different items within this form group, or actually this one element from the form array. And now we once again go back to the information from the array, because this is now displaying meta information. At this point, we wanted to know how many groups really are inside the reactive form, and now we just want to know, okay, which fields are actually inside that array, and we know this from the JSON that you got from the server or from the local stuff. So let child of C options children, and then we can create an ion label. Actually, I want to copy this because I think we had this before. So the label is just the child options label, and the input as well is the form control name child.key placeholder, just like we had before. It really looks like before. And since we're inside this form group name, everything is connected correctly. Now, if we also want to add buttons, ion button to remove and add elements to the array, we can do this, no problem. Let's make this one fill clear, and then on click, we want to call, what we want to call, I think, remove array group. We need to know from which array, because in our reactive form we might have multiple controls that are actually arrays. So we're going to use from the parent c.key again, and we will use the index so we know which element we want to pull out from that array. I think that's everything. Let's use ion icon name trash for now, and then implement remove array group. Good thing we want to implement remove array group if we haven't actually implemented add array group, but we will do this at the same time. So we're gonna add array groups somewhere. Now I should find the right level. I think in here. Okay, while scrolling. Yeah, not inside the ng4, outside the ng4, but still inside the switch case. So we can use another button to call @ArrayGroup. Once again, using the connection to the reactive form with the key, and then passing the meta information, because at that point you need to construct a new group inside the form array, and therefore you need like the blueprint. Oh, today is a hard day to that group. And that's also the reason why I wanted to basically put that logic into its own function, but we will see. Let's just do it. @ArrayGroup. Now got the array name and like something like the object schema children. I really don't know any good name for that. Okay, let's first of all access our form array. Basically the same logic like we had in here. We could even be as cool as this and call this dot. So dry today. Then we're gonna create a new group just like we did in here, and I think the logic is kind of the same. We want to create a new group. We want to now iterate through the children in here. So it's still a tiny bit different, but we could basically do it. Maybe we can do it like this. To the group, we want to add all the controls that were defined in the schema, and in the end, we're gonna push it to our array. I think it's really the same logic, so I think we can refactor this already. Yeah, actually you can do it. I'm not gonna do this, but I think you should see that you can refactor this into one function. Now to remove from an array group, we're gonna get the control once again, and from the control we want to call remove @, and therefore we need this and the index, and then we can remove @the index. So remove array group once again gets the name like address, or perhaps you have a different array like my array, and then you would get that array, and then you can remove @the right index from that very specific control. Now let's hit save again and check out our example. So we got the full name, street. We can now add a new group, and we see phone 2. I can add phone numbers here, and I can submit. And as a result, we would have for the phone key an array of 2 objects in here, basically 2 form groups. And of course, this could now be something else. Okay, and now let's just call this age or something like this. Label my age, not really tied to phone number, but anyway, we're all 11-year-olds. So we got now this block with phone number and my age, and I can add another group and another group, and you see if I submit it now, for the phone we got those groups with the grouped information. And as well, we can remove entries from here, so we end up with that information. Did we cover this before? Yeah, I think we did, where we saw for the address the group as well. And that's it. We've created a dynamic form from JSON data, both in here. We really didn't use anything, only here to check a few controls for group and array. But so far, we haven't added any hard coding stuff. It looks complicated, but once you go through it, it really makes a lot of sense, and you can create powerful dynamic forms based with this or on this logic. And that's the end for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode, this quick win on the Angular specific topic. This was requested by one of the members of the Ionic Academy. So if you got any questions or requests for upcoming tutorials, as always, leave them below the video. I got a long list, but sometimes I move things up and down if I think they're more interesting or less interesting. So give it a try and leave your recommendations below. Also, check out the Ionic Academy, once again, my school to help you with everything Ionic, and leave a like and subscribe so you get notified about the upcoming videos. I hope you will have a great week. I will catch you next week, so happy coding, Simon.